Hey everybody, Bill Sky, the database guy here today, and I know it's been a while, but what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce you to SQL, Structured Query Language. And the way that I'm going to do that is that we're just going to jump right into code. So I'm going to open up a MySQL window, and then I'm going to open up a C++ project, and we're just going to learn a little bit about what SQL is. Mainly just selects today, just retrieving data from a database. So with that said, I'm assuming that you have your MySQL server set up on either your VMware guest on Linux or Windows, it doesn't matter, and you're ready to go. You went through some of those previous videos on how to set everything up. So if you've done that, you're ready to go here. And I'm not going to use Eclipse today. I'm just going to use, just go ahead and use my Genie editor on Linux. You can use your Genie editor on Windows if you want. You can do anything you want. It doesn't matter. This is just going to be a good little video on how to get started with SQL from a programmer's point of view. How do I actually program it in? We're going to be doing both. We're going to be doing just the typing in the SQL query to get the data, but we're also going to be doing it in C++. Now, these methods in C++ is exactly the same, not the exact same syntax, obviously, but it's the same way of doing it that you would do in any other language. I think I might have mentioned that in earlier videos. So let's get right to the coding. Okay, so I'm going to go into and I'm running Mint Linux here. I'm going to go into here and I'm just going to create a new C++ project. And what I'm going to do is, because I'm not going to be using Eclipse, I'm going to be using just the command line. I'm going to be using a simple editor. I'm going to use a 64-bit template. And I'm going to name it something like, I don't know, SQL start, SQL intro. I was going to call it that. And then I'm going to go ahead and edit my main.cpp file. Now, if you're using Eclipse or if you're using anything else, make sure you get all that set up. Pause this video and make sure you get all that set up to make sure that you're ready to go. Now, I've got my editor. Now, if you're using just a standard C++, you're going to have to go, or I should say a standard C++ program, you're going to have to go in and change your makefile. So I'm going to go into the makefile. And to make sure I've got it right, I'm going to go into a makefile from a previous project, and I'm going to add this to the linker. And I'm going to talk about that right after I add it. So I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to go ahead and add it. Now, what this is, the -L means that I want to include in the linker a library. -L means I want to include a library, like a .so file or a lib file or something like that. And the name of the library is going to be MySQL cppcon. Now, if you look at previous videos where I used Eclipse, I did this in the project settings. But because I'm doing this using a makefile, I just go ahead in there and put that on the link step, which is the -O line in my makefile. Okay? I really want to get to makefile videos. I just haven't had a lot of time, but you know, you'll learn a little bit as you look at my other videos. So there you go. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go to my main.cpp, and I'm just going to go ahead and build it. Now I'm going to, in Genie, I'm going to go to this, and I'm just going to say make clean, and then make. And then I'm just going to run it to make sure it runs. It's just going to say hello world and program ending. All right, great. So that's the first step. The second step that we want to do to make the C++ program work, and you probably saw this in my other videos, is that we're going to have to add a bunch of include files. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste them here, and I'm going to talk about each one. The driver.h, this is the driver. This is what allows your program to use the MySQL application programmer's interface. So you have to have that. Exception is used. I don't think we're going to use it today, but exception is used to process exceptions, errors when you call MySQL any kind of a statement that you send it. A result set, this is the data that comes back from the query. So when you execute an SQL query, the result set is what you're going to get back. The statement is the actual SQL statement. I want to ask MySQL or any database system, any relational database management system, I want to send it an SQL statement. I have to put that statement somewhere. So I'm going to put it into a statement object or a statement pointer. And then prepared statement, that is a statement that is compiled and optimized during compile time. A normal statement is actually set up and optimized at runtime. So that makes a program that's using just statements a little bit slower than prepared statements. And I'm going to go through a prepared statement video sometime in the future, but for now we're just going to use statements. Now I'm just going to save and build this again. No problem. I'm going to run the main, and there we go. So everything looks great. Now, before I do anything regarding SQL, I'm going to go and load my terminal. Now you can do this with MySQL Workbench. You can do this with dbeaver, which I actually love that application. But I'm going to do it with the command line just because it's easier for me. I'm just going to log into my MySQL database. I'm going to show databases. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this employees database that I have on this particular server. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, you might want to look at some of my previous videos on how to set this up. And I even have links to the actual file that you would use to set it up. But we're going to be using that today. So, and I'm going to go ahead and be issuing SQL. Now, if you noticed, I did a show database semicolon. SQL ends with a semicolon. So what that means is it means I want to show all the databases on this particular server, and that makes it really easy. Notice how quickly I did this. It was really, really fast. Something else that you might be interested in if you're kind of wondering is that the command line interface on MySQL, you simply say MySQL space -u means I want to log in as a user. The name of the user is root, and then the space -p means I'm going to supply a password. So that's what that means to get into it. All right, so we're all set. All right. So now the first thing that we want to do is we want to set up our variables. So I'm going to go ahead, and actually I like my variables set up before I do any kind of logic or processing. So I'm going to say that I want to get from the SQL namespace, I want to get the driver, and I'm going to call this just a driver pointer. I'm going to do the same thing with connection. And I already talked about what a driver is. But what is a connection? A connection is connecting with the MySQL server. That's really all it is. I want to create a statement. I'm going to assign it null PTR. So a statement, again, is the actual SQL statement that you're going to send to the server. I'm not going to use prepared statement, but I could just put it here. We're not going to use it, but you know, it's there. And then I'm going to do a result set. There we go. So the result set, again, that is the results that you're going to get from the server. And let me kind of give you an example of what a result set is. So from my terminal, I'm going to say use employees. That means that I want to use the employees database. I'm going to show tables. And let's take a look at employees. I'm going to issue my very first SQL query. I'm going to say select asterisk from employees. Now what this means is that I'm using the employees database and I want to select all columns, all rows from the employees table. Whoa, lots of data. Everything you're seeing here, scrolling through right now, that's a result set. It's going to go into a pointer, where the pointer is going to point to the memory that has all that data that query returned. So that's what the result set is used for. Okay, now the next thing I want to do, I probably want to go, because I want to make sure I don't forget, down here I'm going to say connection, close, because we're going to open a connection. I want to close it. Now the reason I'm doing this now is because I want to make sure I don't forget to do it. So I'm going to delete the result set, I'm going to delete the statement, and I'm going to delete the connection. Okay, so that's all we're doing there. I'm going to put a little comment here. I'll clean up my SQL data. That's all I'm going to do there. Okay. All right. So I think we're all set. We're all set to actually start doing some coding. All right. So the first thing that we want to do is, and I'm going to put this on here, I'm going to say, oh, let's call this 2 because 1 is let's set up all right, so that's number 1. Number 2, load the MySQL driver. That's all we want to do. So I'm just going to say driver equals get driver instance. Now, if you're using Eclipse, it's actually going to show you the functions within the actual MySQL include file. So it's going to be a lot easier. You're not going to have to do as much typing. All right, so let's go ahead. Now I'm going to just go ahead and make this. Okay, everything, oh, we got a segmentation fault. I think probably because I tried to delete a result set, a statement, and connection when they're actually null PTR. So I'm trying to delete null. So you might want to do something like this. You might want to say if result is equal to null PTR. Let's say not equal to null PTR. We're going to go ahead and delete it. Else, I'm not going to do anything. If statement is not equal to null PTR. I always like to close off my if statements with an else, even if they're not going to do anything. If connection is not equal to null PTR. Else, I'm just going to close it off. Let's see if that fixes the problem, because I believe it's because I'm trying to delete a null. And still having a problem there, not really sure what it is, maybe because I'm doing a close here. That could be the problem as well. But this right here is very good coding. If for some reason you had an error in your program before you actually created the result set, the statement, or the connection, you've got a problem. You don't want to actually delete them. So I believe that's what this is doing right here. We actually have a close. Let's go ahead and open that up. Let's create that connection. But it looks like the driver instance worked. Maybe not. I might want to go in here and say count cleaning up MySQL data. Let's go ahead and save and build this. And yes, so it looks like that the driver load, the get driver instance function probably worked, because we can see that we're cleaning up MySQL data and it dies right after this line. So it probably dies right here. I could put some more couts in there, but let's just go from there. Okay, so that is the load, the MySQL driver. What's the next thing we want to do? I want to connect to the MySQL server. So I'm just going to say connection equals driver connect. So hey, driver that I already load, I want to connect to localhost with the user ID or ID root and the password. Now I know it's ridiculous they have a password called password, but this is just a development VMware guest, or I should say VirtualBox guest in this case, and I don't care because it's not exposed to the outside. All right, so let's go ahead and make that. Let's run it. All right, notice the segmentation fault died because we had a successful connection. And in future videos, I'm going to show you how to check the connection to make sure that it actually connected correctly. But for right now, we're just gonna do this a shorthand method. Okay, so that's the third thing we want to do. The fourth thing we want to do is I want to set the schema. Now a schema is basically the same as the database. So I'm just going to say connection, set schema, employees. Now, if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I haven't really explained it very well. It was back here when I said use, okay, let's do this. I'm going to say show, let's say show schemas, because a schema is the same as a database. And I'm going to say use employees. The use employees is what this set schema is all about. So set schema means use a specific database. So that's what we're doing there. Now I'm going to go ahead and make and build it again. I always like to and run it and make sure that I didn't kill something by doing that. I'm basically testing my code, almost every line of code that I'm writing. Okay, so now we've got our schema selected. I'm going to now create a statement. So the variable's already there, called stmt. It's a pointer. So I'm just going to say statement equals, hey, connection. I want you to create a statement. And what that does is it sends a pointer to the stmt variable where the statement is located. I'm just going to save and build that. And everything is looking good. All right, we're in really good shape here. Okay, so now let's do our very first query. so execute a simple query. I'm going to say result set. Now remember, when we did the query over here on the window, it returned a whole bunch of data. You can see all that data. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to send that data, or point the res variable to that data that it returns. Okay, so we're going to say, hey, statement that I created previously, execute a query, and I'm just going to say what I had in that window. I'm going to say select asterisk from employees. Oop, forgot the parenthesis and semicolon. I'm going to go ahead and run it. We're going to make it and run it. Oh, okay, so I forgot the equal sign. See, that's exactly why I always save and build my code, especially something new I'm doing. All right, looking good. Now, you might think, oh my God, he just returned all this data into memory. Well, because I deleted everything down here, it freed up that memory. So, not bad. All right. So let's take a look. How do I actually go through all of this data? Well, first of all, let's look at the query that we did here in the window. And there's a lot of data here. Each one of these is a row, but also there's a lot of columns. Let's get up to the top here. It might be easier for me just to scroll like this. Okay, there we go. And we can see at the very top of this query that we've got column names. So there's employee number, there's birth date, their first name, there's last name. Now, to process all that data, you need some kind of a loop. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and create a loop. And the only thing I want to print off is the last name. That's all I'm going to print. I just want to display the last name. So I'm going to create a loop here after I execute my query. So I'm going to say while result set returns a true on the next function. So what does that mean? That means that I'm going to execute the next function, and the next function is either going to return true or false. If it returns false, that means I don't have any more data to process. If it means true, that means that I've actually returned a row from the query. Okay? And I'm just going to say cout. Hey, result set, I want you to get a string from the last name column. And I want you to send it to cout. That's all we're doing. Now, where did I get this last name thing? Well, if we go back to our little query here on the command line, I got it from here. The column name that indicates first name, or I should say last name. We're messing with last name, right? Now, instead of doing a big query to see those column names, what you could do is you could say describe employees. And it will show you all of the columns within the employee table. So it's just describe employees, and that way you don't have to have this huge long piece of, or that huge long data display. Okay, so let's go ahead and save and build this. And run it. There you go, look at that. So my while loop is going through every single row of all the data returned in the query. Now, my terminal here on this Genie terminal is actually limited to the number of lines. I wonder if I can change that. Let's see. Scroll back lines. I'm going to say 50,000. And let's see if that works. Well, I'm not sure if it worked, but okay. Anyway, doesn't matter. Sorry I got off track there. All right. Now, one thing you might want to do is you might want to not show as much data when you're doing testing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say limit 10. So that means do the query, but limit it to only 10 rows to be returned. And let's take a look, and there we go. So it showed my last names. You might want to put a header in front there. So I'm going to say cout last name. Might make it look a little bit better. And then I'll put some underlines there. Save and build that. All right, great. So it looks a little bit better there. You might want to put some blank lines, things like that in between. So that's your first query, that we simply want to display that particular data. Now, we're still returning every single column of every row because we have that asterisk there in the query. Instead of just doing the asterisk, instead of saying asterisk, because you're using up a lot of memory doing that, especially in a really huge table, you might want to do something different. I'm just going to return one single row. So I'm going to comment out the first line, and I'm going to say last name. And what this is going to do is it's only going to return the last name data. So let's go ahead and build that. Now the display will be exactly the same, but notice, I don't know if you noticed, it was a lot faster. And the reason for that is because I only returned the last name. You can specify one, you can specify multiple columns if you'd like. And we're only limiting it by 10, so that's helping us out as well. Okay. Now, if you notice, these last names aren't really sorted very well. So let's go ahead and create another query. And I'm commenting out the previous query because I'm enhancing my queries, but I'm not removing the old queries. I still have them there commented, so I may need to go back to those. So let's say employees order by last name. So what that's going to do, the order by is actually going to sort the result set. And whoa, wait a minute. What are all those duplicated names? Let's make sure our code's working right. So I'm going to say select last name from employees, order by last name, limit 10. Okay, let's say limit 100. Oh my goodness, do we have an error here? Oh, no, we just have a lot of people with the same last name, and that's because this is a test database. So, okay, so we've got, we just have a lot of duplicates. Let's say you want to eliminate those duplicates. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to do another change to my SQL. I'm going to say select distinct last name. That is like unique. I want to only display the first 10 unique last names. Let's save and build that. Let's run it. And you can see that Ahmadut, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, Ahmadut was displayed, but then also action. So everybody else that had the last name Ahmad T, they're ignored because I use that word distinct. So distinct is actually pretty useful. Now, what if I want to display two columns? I want to return two columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a number 7 here. And I'm going to say multi-column query. So let's do that. And I'm going to just say, I'm just going to change my result set to this. And I'm going to say select employee number, last name from employees. I'm going to get rid of the order by. I believe employee number, it's automatic, the databases, or this particular table is actually sorted by employee number. And let's go here and copy our while loop. And I'm going to say employee number. I'm going to put in some tabs here. And last name. And then let's go ahead and do our, I would probably use a IO manip to do this in production. But for right now, let's just do something simple like tabs. All right. So the while loop is going to be exactly the same with the last name. The difference is going to be is that we're going to now get the employee number. Now let's go back to our terminal, and I'm going to say describe employees. And we can see that employee number is an integer. Last name is basically a string, which is why we used getString. But now we have to use a different function because we're getting a number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say res, and I believe it's getInt, and we specify the column name. And after that, I'm going to send the 3 T's, because those are the same as in our header. And I'm going to end it there. And then I'm going to do the getString last name. Whoa, look at that. Pretty slick. Now, it doesn't look like our data is really correct here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of some of these T's, 2 of them, get my data looking good, my report to look good. Okay, I don't think that's right, so let's go ahead. And I think it's because of the size of the data, it's the size of my headers. So let's put those \T's back in the data output. Again, this is why you use iomanip in C++. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that looks a lot better. Probably I could get rid of these spaces here in my column headers. Now, I've mentioned iomanip a couple of times. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you might want to take a look at my C++ playlist, and you'll see how to set up iomanip. Okay, isn't quite what I'm looking for here. Let's go ahead and put those back in there. I would be done right now if I was using iomanip. There's a lot of trial and error using tabs. All right, that's better. Okay. So that's multiple columns. The other thing I could do is I could order them different. I could say order by last name. And we can see all of the AMOD T's and their employee number over here. Okay, pretty cool. So that's how you send a query to the SQL server, the MySQL server, and then you get a result sent back. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. It's an introduction to SQL very, very first. It should give you more than enough information to start playing with data queries in your relational database system, in this case MySQL. And we're going to get more and more complex. I'm going to probably do some more SQL queries on the next video. Hope to see you then.